Hello, friends. This is the Netarts Friends Church podcast. We are Jesus people, Kingdom of God people, welcoming, yearning, sharing. And we're glad you're connecting here with us. We'd love to connect in person as well. If you're inclined to support this podcast or for more information, just hop on over to netartsfriends.org. That's netartsfriends.org. Let's jump into today's sermon. The characters in our gospel story today do not all have names. So I hope you don't mind me taking a little imaginative liberty and giving a few of them names. If you want to follow along today, you can follow along in Luke 17:11 through 19. But I would invite you to simply listen to this gospel story. Imagine the story. Soak it in. When the sores first showed up on Yitzhak's ankles, he thought, I must have bumped a rock. He tried to keep them hidden. He tried to nurture them to health, but the sores spread up his legs. This was no time for a skin disease. Yitzhak had 3 beautiful children, a wonderful wife, a stonemason's business that he ran with his brother, but Yitzhak couldn't hide it. It wasn't long before everyone knew Yitzhak was sick. Yitzhak had a skin disease. The day that Yitzhak was declared unclean, a leper, was almost worse than dying. He remembered the community members chanting, "Unclean, unclean." It was the day Yitzhak's life fell apart. Leprosy was not just a physical disorder. It was a social disorder, a spiritual disorder. Yitzhak wasn't allowed to approach people. He was commanded to tear his clothes and mess up his hair to let people know from a distance that he was a leper. He was ostracized, quarantined from the rest of society. No contact with friends, loved ones, relatives. The narratives of the day said that lepers were people who God was angry with and punishing, and every leper had to wrestle with spiritual self-hatred and shame. What did I do to deserve this? Is there a God who will ever forgive me and ever make this right? Yitzhak lived on the borderlands between Galilee and Samaria, 2 people groups who hated one another, the Jews and the Samaritans. They desecrated one another's holy sites. They were known to massacre one another. They both believed that they were the original and true Israelites and that the other group had lost their way. They both believed that they were the authentic bearers of the biblical tradition. The Samaritans called the Jews the erroneous ones, the rebels, the heretics, the people of error. The Samaritans knew that they had the correct temple location at Mount Gerizim. They had the correct books of Moses. They had the royal priestly bloodlines. And the Jews called the Samaritans half-breeds. They believed that the Samaritans had scripture wrong, worship wrong, marriage wrong. They said the Samaritans were dogs. They were polluted infidels, unclean, contemptible, corrupt. They were a threat to society. The Jews were convinced that God hated the Samaritans. And that's what they both thought of one another, until leprosy. It's strange how a crisis can take controversies, prejudices, and polarizations that feel like they matter so intensely, and suddenly they don't matter at all. Suddenly, Yitzhak's only path of survival and relationship and friendship was to share life with a community of lepers, Jewish and Samaritans, a community including his enemies, people he would have never dreamed of sharing life with. They couldn't afford the pettiness of border disputes, divides, arguments, prejudice. They needed one another. They were all they had. Some were Samaritan, some were Jewish, but they were bound together by their common suffering, their common humanity. Perhaps some had true Hansen's disease, true leprosy, but leprosy was a blanket term in those days for lots of skin diseases, ulcerations, sores, infections, discolorations. They had all become unclean, unable to integrate into society in any way. A crisis had upended their life, and it no longer mattered how skilled they had been in their former life. Nobody wanted them around. No one wanted to buy anything that they touched. The loneliness ached. They were all living with the grief of loss, knowing that their families were trying to survive without them. They all carried the pain of social rejection, feeling forgotten. They all had days that felt completely hopeless. Their sense of purpose in life was uprooted. They needed one another. Now, whether it is leprosy or a tumor, an earthquake, a flood, a fire, a tornado, something else, there are common experiences of suffering that make all the petty prejudice and divides and disputes of your life disappear. Suddenly you need that person who's so different from you, and suddenly you're suffering side by side. And experiences like this change people. As a young pastor, I did an internship in Greensburg, Kansas, a community that was wiped off of the map by a EF5 tornado. They realized the pettiness of their disputes and prejudices and realized that they needed one another. They came together in so many ways. They were changed people. They came to see the goodness in one another. They came to see their world and what was most important differently. Whether it's leprosy or a tornado or something else, part of that experience for anyone involves thinking back on missed opportunities, wishing you could go back. If you knew back then what you know now, there are moments, there are relationships that you would handle so differently. There's so much that you would not have taken for granted. You would adjust what you treated as important and unimportant. One day, Yitzhak heard about a Jewish rabbi. Known for his healing, he was traveling south, headed their way. His name was Jesus. Now, before leprosy, you would have never seen a group of Samaritan and Jewish friends on their way to see a Jewish rabbi together. Why would a Samaritan try to see a Jewish rabbi? A Jewish rabbi was considered a Samaritan's enemy, and vice versa. But that didn't matter anymore. Yitzhak and his friends stood outside the village waiting, watching for this rabbi. And eventually they saw a group of travelers coming, and Yitzhak's friends started shouting, started yelling, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us. Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And Yitzhak joined in. Now, when it's been 10 years, 20 years since you held your child or embraced your spouse or sat down to a meal with friends, took up the tools of your trade, it can feel dangerous, terrifying to give voice to all that pain and all that hope. How do you keep all of that strained desperation at bay in your voice? Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. People never walked right up to them anymore. They were lepers. But this Rabbi Jesus came close enough to speak. He came close enough to truly see them. He didn't stand at a distance and shout. He came and he looked at them all with the kindest look on his face, both pain and joy. His eyes conveyed a sense of highest esteem, that he was so proud of them, standing there in their tattered rags, shouting, trying to keep the desperation behind their voices in check. And Jesus smiled. He said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests. Take real steps towards social wholeness, even before they were physically whole, before they were cleansed." Yitzhak knew what this meant. The priest was the one who declared you clean. It didn't matter if you thought that you were better. You had to go to the temple and be inspected by a priest, and the priest had to declare you clean before you could be accepted back into society, before you could hold your children or celebrate a Passover or take up the tools of your trade or kiss your wife. Leviticus 14 outline the inspection, the cleansing rituals, the sacrifices necessary for any leper to be certified as clean and reintegrate into society. But suddenly, there in front of Yitzhak was the glaring issue, the old divide, the old prejudice, the old pettiness, the conundrum that used to be such a hot button topic. Which temple? Which priests? Jerusalem? Mount Gerizim? Jewish priests? Samaritan priests? Jesus didn't answer with a singular. He answered with a plural. He had smiled and said, "Go and show yourselves to the priests," plural. This band of Samaritan and Jewish lepers who had come together as brothers were being invited to go show themselves to the Samaritan priests, let the Gerizim temple declare them clean, and go and show themselves to the Jewish priests, let the Jerusalem temple declare them clean. And I wonder what Yitzhak and his friends thought as they went, as they took off walking. Did they think something was going to happen? Anything was going to happen? Did they feel let down by this Jewish rabbi? Were they actually on their way to any temple? Yitzhak could not have said how many minutes they had been walking when his legs started to feel strangely warm. He glanced down and caught his breath. He pulled frantically at his bandages, unable to contain himself. His sores were gone. He could feel the blood warming his feet. His circulation was improving. Joseph's nose was back. Perfect fingers were bulging out of Yefet's bandaged hands. They were quite a sight there in the road. 10 men pulling their clothes off, looking at their skin, throwing their heads back with laughter, whooping and hollering and cheering in delight, hugging one another, slapping one another on the back. It felt like a dream. They were cleansed. Somehow their wounds had evaporated into thin air. The pain was gone. The feeling returned. The circulation improved. And as they realized what happened, the tears began to stream. It was like all the pain that they'd been holding inside could finally make its way out. Yitzhak could go home. He could hold his children, kiss his wife, take up the tools of his trade, earn a living. In the middle of the celebration, Joseph started running around. He hadn't been able to run for years. "Let's go! Let's go!" None of them could get to the priest fast enough, and they all took off laughing and running, breathless and exuberant. Yitzhak took off running with them, but something inside of him brought him to pause. How many hours had he spent regretting opportunities that he had let pass him by? How many hours had he wished that he could have another chance, a do-over, to live differently, wishing that he hadn't just taken it all for granted? And suddenly, that opportunity had been given to him by a Jewish rabbi. If he ran with his brothers to the priests, he may never see that Jewish rabbi ever again. He didn't live in a world with text messaging and emails. He couldn't look up that Jewish rabbi on social media. he may never get the chance to pour out his gratitude. And in an instant, Yitzhak knew which direction he had to run first. He couldn't let that Jewish rabbi get away from him. He knew that if he did, he would always regret it. Yitzhak went running back down the road, shouting, whooping, hollering his thanks to God. They said that lepers were the walking dead, and he couldn't help feeling like someone who had just been raised from the dead. He caught up with Jesus, and his followers made way for him. Yitzhak fell down at Jesus' feet, cradling them in his hands and kissing them. He couldn't stop himself. He couldn't say it enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jesus looked down at him with the same kind eyes of joy and understanding, and with a chuckle in his voice, he said, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" And there it was. Yitzhak was a Samaritan. In the old world, with the old rules, the old Yitzhak wouldn't have been caught dead touching the feet of his enemy, a despised Jewish rabbi. But this wasn't the old world, and this wasn't just any Jewish rabbi. Jesus didn't say that word foreigner with disdain. It was spoken with deepest admiration. It was as if Jesus wanted to hold Yitzhak up as an example to all of his Jewish followers. And with the deepest love, Jesus said to Yitzhak, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well. It has saved you." The word there is the salvation word. All through the Gospels, it's sozo. It was a much more profound word than simply being cleansed. It wasn't just about the symptoms. Jesus used this word that was spiritual and relational and physical and economic. It was the salvation word. Yitzhak was a person worth rescuing, worth restoring, worth saving, and his faith was part of it. Yitzhak wondered how it was even faith. He had blamed himself. He had questioned his faith for so long. When you've lived with something like leprosy for years, you can feel like you have no faith, like you're incapable of faith, like other people might know how to do this faith thing, but you must not. You don't. Yitzhak didn't think he had done anything religious. He'd simply run back down the road because leprosy had taught him not to take anything for granted. And if he was ever to get his life back, he didn't want to let the important moments and the important opportunities pass him by. And so he knew he would catch up with his brothers, but he didn't want to lie in bed every night for the rest of his life wishing he had given thanks to that Jesus character. Was it faith? Jesus, this healing, saving rabbi, called it saving faith. Jesus saw Yitzhak in a deeper way than Yitzhak saw Yitzhak. He saw Yitzhak's gratitude, his faith. He saw the saving work that was unfolding in his life. Yitzhak was no longer a proud Samaritan who wouldn't dream of kissing the feet of an enemy, a Jewish rabbi. Now Yitzhak ran down the road to kiss the feet of a Jewish rabbi because he knew he would regret missing that moment. Yitzhak had learned not to take anything for granted. He had learned to see the gifts in life. He was proud to catch up with his Jewish and Samaritan brothers and show themselves to the Samaritan priests and the Jewish priests. And he wasn't going back to living under those old scripts and narratives of petty divides. These men who had been with him in leprosy would always be his brothers. And more than either temple, he would always remember that Jewish rabbi who had praised his faith, the faith of a Samaritan. As Luke says in his second volume, The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. He's not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. He marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him, grope for him, and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. I want to invite you to use Yitzhak's story to reflect on your story, your life. Life is hard. It's stressful. All kinds of bad things happen. Your body gets old. It wears out. No matter how much you do to fix up your house, there's always more to do. Your relationships, your marriage feel like they could sure use some help. Your relatives have all kinds of messes in their lives. Work is stressful. Retirement doesn't turn out to be what you had hoped. A single bag of groceries costs more money than you want to think about. You're living in a nation that feels like it's on the edge and a planet that's spinning in chaos. And all that can spin you into a really dark place. And so we need reminders from people like Yitzhak to give thanks, to see the light, to give thanks for the light from people who have lived in very dark places. It's not that everything happens for a reason, it's simply that everything happens. God's not the source, not the engineer of the darkness. God is the source of the light. And God can take even the worst darkness and bring light and bring life, no matter how dark things become. Inasmuch as anyone has any light, that light is the light of God. As Luke writes in his second volume, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. God did this so they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him, grope for him, and find him, though he's not far from any one of us. As John the Baptist says in John 3:27, a person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given him from above. As the Apostle James says, every good thing given, every perfect gift is from above. It comes down from the Father of lights, from the Creator, the sustainer of the heavens, in whom there's no variation, no rising or setting or shadow cast by his turning. There's no eclipse. This world has trouble. That much is given. We know that everything happens. Yet Jesus says, the thief comes only to steal, to kill, to destroy. That's everything happens. But he says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Practicing gratitude doesn't mean that we have to deny the struggle and the pain and the hardship. It means seeing the gifts, seeing the light. It's fascinating to note what so many studies find about gratitude, practicing gratitude. It is so connected to our well-being and to our happiness and to getting better sleep and lower depression and longevity. So I want to ask you for a moment to look at your life from a distance. If someone like Yitzhak could spend the next week with you, what is it that you have right now that is positive in your life? What would Yitzhak point out? What would Yitzhak see? What kinds of opportunities would cause Yitzhak to say, don't miss that opportunity, run towards it? And what are the squabbles? What are the disputes, the divides that someone like Yitzhak just would not have time for? And what are you to make of Jesus using people over and over who were the most despised people in his day? A Samaritan leper, like that's such a despised person in Jesus's day. But over and over, Jesus uses people like this as examples of faith to be upheld to the rest of the community. Jesus sees beyond the surface what others cannot see. What are you to make of that? What is it that you have in your life, but maybe you're looking past it? You know, it's easy to see so much of life through a self-sufficiency lens and an I earned it lens. Like when you receive a paycheck, you don't send a thank you card to your employer. You don't say, "Oh, thank you for such a kind gift that you sent me. It's going to help me. It's going to help my family." You don't send anything like that because it's a paycheck. It's an arrangement. You earned that paycheck. You worked hard at that job. You worked hard to develop those talents and those abilities. And so it's very easy to miss the deeper truth. You may have worked hard to develop the talents and the abilities and get the job, but where did all of that come from? Where did those abilities come from? Are they actually yours to begin with, or are they gifts given to you for the sake of others? It might sound morbid, but what if your life did turn upside down tomorrow? A tsunami, a fire, cancer. There's so many ways it can all go wrong faster than you think. And we're not saying because God sends that. It's just because everything happens. What if it did turn upside down? What are those gifts in your life that you tend to look past, but you might end up looking back and saying, wow, I can't believe that I didn't see what I had. Wishing you could go back and give thanks. What are those hot button issues right now that seem oh so important, but in a different light, in the light of needing one another, they might suddenly look oh so petty? And what are those moments, those opportunities that you might wish that you would not have let slip by you? So I want to just bring you to a moment of reflection first. What is the Spirit inviting you to see? In our gathered worship, we had a discussion time. We did not just end with reflection, we ended with sharing. And so I would offer this to you to have a conversation with someone in your life. Don't let this stuff just stay inside of you. Speak gratitude and speak hope. What is standing out to give thanks for today? And then what are those moments and those opportunities that you don't want to miss? Thank you for joining us for a Sunday sermon from Netart's Friends Church. We hope you'll join us soon for one of our in-person worship gatherings. For more information, hop on over to netartsfriends.org. God's peace be with you, friends.